speak for many in this room when we say that we applaud your bravery and we applaud the responsibility you had to make that time. Delilah, a pivotal moment when you decided it is time to leave this Koa baby that you had been building.
Yeah, I think for me there was no pivotal moment because I think for me when building a company, the most important part is like the team. And like I always put my team first, and I think it was one day where I was like, hey, I really want to go home and visit my mom, and that turned into like a conversation. And you know, when you just sit there and you're like, I'm done here, and that was basically it. And 2 weeks later, I was out. So like for me, it had built up for like a while, and the hardest part for me was just like the team, but make sure that they're all taken care of. But yeah, it wasn't like a big come to this moment or like pressure, like that the business wasn't gonna work, but it was just that I was finished in myself. There was nothing more that I could give to that company.
And how did you internally come to that decision? Though there were kind of indicators along the way in the dynamics, how did you yourself decide it's time?
Yeah, I think for a long time it's not it's something that I had thought through a lot, like over time. And like one of the biggest things that come to your head when you're trying to make such a decision is like, oh, what does the optics look like? What does that mean? What does that say about me as like a person, but also what does that say about me as like an entrepreneur? Does that mean that I'm admitting that I'm not capable? Does that mean that I am admitting that I am at fault if this company doesn't work? Like a lot of questions. But ultimately, like I think you touched on it. I think your mental health as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as someone in any business or any company is really more important. And at the end of the day, at that moment, I was just like, man, I don't care. If anyone has something to say, I really don't care because I need to like breathe or I need to step away. So it took a long time to get there, but like a lot of clarity in like that moment.
And that's always really encouraging to hear when you're on the other side, is to hear the word clarity and peace. So applaud you too on making that decision that I'm sure wasn't easy. And Ian, you've had many different transitions, but let's focus particularly on the transition from Popote Wireless to Horizons. Do you remember, was it a moment, or to Delilah's point, was it a sequence of moments that made you decide this Popote connection thing in and of itself doesn't really work for me? It's time for me to expand into something else. Tell us a bit about that decision point.
Yeah, I've actually had some time to think as these guys were talking. It was more about time. There was an inordinate amount of time and energy going into trying to resolve the shareholder disputes. So we had, as I mentioned, there were a number of investors. There were what they referred to as the money guys, and then the sweat equity guys, the ideas people, and that was us. And we came to a realization that the money people did not see our value. And the business had come to a point where we needed to go into another round of capital raising. So we got stuck. We got stuck because they wanted to open up the shareholders agreement. And they said the shares need to be redistributed before we can go to the market. So 6 months later, nothing has happened. We're losing ground in the market. I was looking at this situation, and I couldn't see an end to it. And certainly, it was not going to work for me because I had my own pressures at home, as you can imagine, a young family, and and even the decision to go into out of a comfortable corporate career into the topsy-turvy world of being an entrepreneur. It's not a popular house. I see people smiling. Yeah. So, but I think the interesting thing, why it was possible to move, is I think I had overcome the biggest barrier, which was making that move from corporate, come to the life, into business. I lost my fear. I'd also seen that it was possible for an idea to be brought alive. So, in a sense, I had confidence, and I've been able to see an opportunity. And I talked about the connection between what we were doing. Because what we were doing is we were selling broadband. We were one of the first broadband companies in Nairobi. And my role was we were building a network of business centers through which we could sell broadband and sell an experience. And the people that were patronizing my centers were actually remote workers. So I didn't really know what I was seeing, but I was asking guys, you're always here, where's your office? And they say, but this is my office. So there was a combination of that aha moment. There seems to be something here, on the one hand, and on the other hand, a difficult situation with all these shareholders, time passing, and so it was at that moment that I decided I can see a way out of this. I made that move. And those business centers evolved into Horizons offices. We were actually working at Pioneers in serviced offices, co-working. That was about 15 years ago. And we were able to craft something which is then evolved into one of the spaces that we're enjoying today. So that's what happened.
Excellent. I think I speak for all of us when we say we're grateful. We're all beneficiaries of you making that decision. To what lies ahead, which I'm very excited to hear more about. So, Mike, tell us that decision point. We're working with government partners, things aren't moving. At what point, or what sequence of points, did you say, okay, it's time for me to let this thing go?
I think there are many data points to consider. One is you are a 20-year-old business. You got 200 employees. You got this project that then seems to be moving forward. Your customer is not receptive. You have meetings, they don't show up. You've invested $8 million in costs. You've got an office full of people who come every day. You're bleeding cash. No one is really listening to you. You call this cabinet secretary, she'll not return your call, and you figure out, and I have a contract. What's wrong with this? But you're bleeding cash, right? So then you have to make a decision. What do you do? Right? You still have a contract. Then at some point you read in the newspaper the contract is cancelled. They never told you. You receive a letter. Then you say, okay, what do I do with this human being? So many people I've trained, I've made them leave their jobs. Their careers haven't been right. So what do? Do I try and salvage this contract? Not realizing that government makes a government person makes a decision, whether it's right or wrong. Once it's made, it's made. It's very hard to bring it back. That took me a long time to understand. Like, how can somebody do this kind of stuff? Right? Like, why? Who's this? Anyway, then I decided I'm going to push this forward. But then I realized I'm highly invested as an individual in this company, as Michael, for 20 years. My shareholders, yes, they are constituent shareholders, but they've put money. But I'm thinking they're going to pull up with me. Let's go and fight. Let's go and push this together. Right? But they don't want to fight government because they also have got other game plan. They've got other transactions they're doing with government. So they'd rather write me off, right? And protect the other businesses. So I say, okay, that's how it goes. Okay, let's continue that. The tipping point for me is somebody told me, Mike, this is a poison chalice. I can't help it. And I went to bed and thought, how do I deal with this issue? I decided to sue government. I knew once I sue these guys, I'm never going to do business with them again. So I knew that once I draw that line on the sand, that's it, right? And I knew this has to happen. The day I did that, we had a shareholder meeting, the major shareholder said, you cannot sue them. I told them I have to sue government. So eventually they chose to exit at $1. They don't care. We are exiting. Take the money, we don't want it. You have to exit this business. And I realized really I was alone in this. Money is just paper. Some guy can give you $20 million for them, it's, they can write it off. You can't write off 20 years of your time in that business. They can't. So at that point I knew that I have to do this and I have to take it to its logical conclusion. So the moment you sue government, how can you do really? It's a court case, it can take 4 years, 3 years, whatever. So that happened. There's always divine intervention. I'm driving from my house. I think out of stress I was maybe 2-3 times. My driver tells me, "You boss, what's up? Maybe you're having heart blood pressure or something." I said, "What do you mean?" So I pick a call. I call my physician. He tells me, "Mike, that's not good. Why don't I send a lab to your office?" So he sends me a prescription. He tells me there's a lab coming to your office. I drop my son in school. I go back to the office and there's a lab waiting for me. They do blood work. I say, "Oh, okay." I pay them. The doctor calls me 3 hours later. "Oh, this is a problem. Okay, I was taking too much aspirin, I guess." And does the thing. And then I get some medicine. Again, I pay by M-Pesa to a lab and to a pharmacy. Exactly a week later, it happens to my son. I brought him to school, same thing. I take him to my office, I have a very serious meeting with my bankers, and the same process. And I told myself, this is a business. I don't know the hospital, I don't know the doctor, I don't know the lab, I don't know the pharmacy. I can actually do this. Then I told my guys, the ones who are remaining now, I've been firing guys, 200, we fired 30 this month. 140. It's like you're playing, you're pumping fuel, right? You need to figure out, am I going to land this plane? This 747, I need to land this thing. If I land it, I'll never take off again. So I had to keep what you call, they keep 30 people in my business. So I told them, guys, now, I have a new plan. I told them, let's run everything. Let us map the patient journey in terms of what I've gone through. If you get sick at home, can you get a doctor? Can you get medicine? And I said, my amazing. So we told the guys, out of the office, let's go and do research. And that's how I started my new business. 4 months later, I said, we need to give this business a name. We don't know, what do we call it? And when I started a bar, the restaurant, we sat for till midnight and we figured out a name called Ponea. And that's how I moved into my new business.
Thank you so much, Mike. So one thing that we've discussed amongst ourselves is lessons learned, and there have been many. So I'd love to open it up to the panelists to maybe reflect on 1 or 2 of the big lessons that you learned as you were transitioning. Anyone?
Okay. I think when you start your first company, you go in very green-eyed and very excited and don't necessarily think like all of the dynamics through, especially when it comes to like emotional intelligence, and especially when it comes to like relationships, like your business partners and the like. For me, I think the relationship, if you're a single, like a solo co-founder, doesn't necessarily, or founder doesn't really apply to you, but if you have a team, 1 or 2, 3, 4 people even, that relationship between the team is so important because the company really hinges on that relationship at certain points. If the company is doing well, your relationship is most likely going to be doing well, but as soon as things start going a bit off, like the strength and the trust and your ability to work through tough situations, like the company begins to hinge on that. And if you're not able to kind of figure that out before you jump onto that journey with somebody, I think that can go either way. It can go great. I'm sure you've seen like some really great experiences, but as a female co-founder in this ecosystem, most of my peers have had negative experiences with co-founders that were men. Not to say anything about you men here, I don't want to, but yes, from my cohort of women who have built companies here in Kenya that have founded technology companies and have raised and have been in the tech space in the last 3 years, most of those companies that have closed or women have exited, it's because they've had a bad experience. It could be, personalities. It could be that the trust that you had with your co-founder gets eroded. It could be some, anything really. But yeah, I think that for me was a really, really big learning point. I have in the new company, my co-founder is also a male co-founder, and the relationship, the working relationship, the way that we communicate, the way that we work together is almost night and day to my first company, and that really has been the biggest takeaway for me. And also just like really not compromising on your values. No matter if it's like a 10 million upside, you would rather not have that and really have like your integrity, really have your name untarnished, your team happy, and those relationships still strong. Than kind of going through the mud. I think we were talking about being in the trenches earlier. The being in the trenches, not having a good experience. Because ultimately, I think building a company is like building a family, and you're really in it for the long haul. So you'd rather have a much better experience than like a negative one.
Thank you, Delilah. Just to follow up, what are some tactical ways that some of the earlier co-founders in the room can test for co-founder compatibility?
Yeah, I think working with your co-founder like prior. So whether it's like not committing to being a co-founder and like working on a few things, I think you also really need to pressure test. I know that like with this new venture, my co-founder, I really pressure tested situations. I threw a fit just to throw a fit. It didn't make sense, just to see how they would react. But it's important, because sometimes when you're under pressure, you don't know how somebody else is going to react to your pressure, your behavior. And it's so important to know that. And so we worked together for a long time. My current co-founder, we worked through different problems. We sat, we really thought about stuff. We talked about our values. We went through like scenarios, and also really tried to work through things that like, hey, I don't agree. Like, where do we find the middle? And just watching somebody else or experiencing how they go, their thought process to things can really open your eyes, I think.
So you dated your now co-founder.
Yeah, yes, you could say that.
I can share a lot of lessons learned. Let me just pick up one or two. And you brought up a kind of ones, by the way. You said that female co-founders there seems to be some experience with male co-founders. I'm very interested about that. We'll talk about that. Perhaps some thoughts. I think for me, if I can just maybe talk about the Potter one, I think having an exit plan. Many of us don't think about how you're going to exit, because naturally you're not thinking about the end. You're all really focused on the beginning. It's really, really important. Why are you starting this business? Is this business something that you're building for the long term, and something that you want to do in perpetuity, or is it about creating value that you can at some point in time release? So I think it's very important to have an exit plan. And I think if we had thought that through with my co-founders, I think we would have averted a lot of the issues that we experienced. So I think that's one very important. The second one, and I think it goes a long way in addressing a lot of conflict or potential conflict amongst partners in a business, is to get your governance right.
Yes.
Because with my current business, I think I was fortunate. I had shareholders who were very particular about this. I was a little bit hesitant, but the beauty about governance is, because there's so much emotion as entrepreneurs or as founders in our businesses, we're very, very, very emotionally connected to our businesses. It's good to have people who can keep you grounded. And the composition of your board becomes very important. Make sure you choose well. The independence goes a long way to giving you that objective view and sort of helping you to be accountable to something. Probably all of you be accountable to something. So governance, I think, has gone a long way, and it's just good practice, especially when you're going, down the line to fundraise and that sort of thing. The benefits of having all your